It is my pleasure now to introduce the next speaker, who's going to talk about democratizing access. I would like to welcome Sharad Sharma. Sharad Sharma co-founded the iSPIRT Foundation, a non-profit technology think tank that has been conceptualizing the India stack, health stack, and other digital public goods. Sharad also co-founded Teltier Technologies, a wireless infrastructure startup, now part of Cisco. And he's an active angel investor with over 24 investments. He's also instrumental in the success of India's first IP-focused fund, the India Innovation Fund. Sharad is a member of the National Startup Advisory Council, SEBI's Financial, Regulatory and Technology Committee. He chairs the IFSCA's Expert Committee on Asset Tokenization and is a member of UN AI Advisory Body. An alumnus of Delhi College of Engineering, he previously held R&D leadership positions at Yahoo, Veritas, Symantec, Lucent and AT&T. Sharad, also happy to introduce him as my mentor. So Sharad, one of my mentors, please welcome.
Thank you, Vinod, for that wonderful presentation. You know, obviously our defining challenge of this era is climate and climate change, and what do we do to deal with it. And perhaps you could say the other defining element that will drive change in our lives is AI. So I'm going to do something rather crazy. This is a presentation I'm sharing with you, which I shared. So the government of India set up an AI committee which had its first meeting today, right? And it's chaired by Dr. Rajesh Sood, who Dipanvita, you know very well, our principal scientific advisor. So I'm actually going to share with you some of the slides from there. Why am I doing this? Because I want to give you a sense of the pathway that India can change to become a meaningful player in a new area like AI. And of course, this has strong kind of intersection with health and healthcare, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So first is, everybody in the world will be a user of AI. There's no doubt about that. The question that we have is, will we be a producer of AI? Do you know, can anybody shout out a neighboring country's name, a neighboring country, which doesn't have a mobile operator? Everybody has a mobile operator. There are hundreds of countries that have mobile operators, right? Jio is one of the world's best mobile operator. But the fact is that how many suppliers are there to those mobile operators? They're called hens: Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia and Samsung. 4 companies supply to all of them. Do you know of a country which doesn't have an airline? Everybody has an airline, 1 or 2 or many. Boeing and Airbus make more money than all the airlines put together. And this is not surprising, I could go on and on. So the question here is not whether India will consume AI, which of course it will. The question is, will India create AI models, produce AI models as it goes forward? Can we be like what we have done in space? Can we be one of the 5 countries in the world that can send satellites to space? Do you know how many countries have sent satellites to space? 60 countries. But those 60 countries have used the capability of those 5 countries to send the satellites to space. So are we going to be in those 50 or are we going to be in those 5? That's the question even for AI. Now some countries are small, they've given up. They say we'll be happy being a consumer. Let's just slow down the use of AI so that we can make sure that our citizens are well protected. That's the first camp that you see. Pause AI camp. Right? Very reasonable approach. Second is saying, ye bahut mushkil hai. Let us set up a BHEL or a Maruti type institution that will do it for us. Do you think that's a good idea? How many of you think by show of hands that's a good idea? I see 1 hand going up, 2 hands going up. I am not in that camp. Right? Because I don't think that is the path forward as well. What is the path forward is to empower our startups to be able to compete. Because even China does not, for heaven's sake, believe in that BHEL Maruti model. Do you know when it came to telecom, I mentioned Huawei a little while back. Huawei was formed 31 months after C-Dot. Did they form it as a government company? No. In fact, was Huawei a natural winner? No. Till recently it was ZTE and others. Even China back in time, when we thought we must go for a national champion approach, they said our job is to create many companies, the market will decide who the winner will be. At that time it was not clear it was going to be Huawei and ZTE. So if a communist nation is not willing to follow that approach, this is not an approach that's worked for us, it's not an approach that will work even again in the future. So the question is, we have to create an ecosystem. The problem that we face when you define this as an ecosystem problem, which is the discussion that we have in IKP all the time, is that our conviction that we can create an ecosystem that will produce a circle of 5 winner. In other words, there'll be only 5 companies in the world that will be meaningful players, and one of those 5 companies will be an Indian company. For that you need to create an ecosystem. Because, for example, if there was only TCS doing IT services, would TCS be successful? No. Success of TCS required that there were Infosys and Wipro and Tech Mahindra and others nipping at their heels. This helped everybody be more successful. Is that not right? So you need an ecosystem to create a national champion. So the question then comes up is, our track record in India for creating national champions is not very good using the ecosystem approach. So therefore people shrivel away from this exercise. And why do I bring it up is because the role of IKP is to actually be a player in building the ecosystem. So one of the things that we tell them is that, look, we built an ecosystem around India Stack, as many of you know. What are the repeatable learnings that have come from there? One of which is have a clear vision very early. What is that clear vision in the item number 1? Some of you may know this slide. It's called the Rajni slide. It's a very famous slide now, but it's there from 2013. So from 2013, 10 years ago, this slide is a 2013 slide. From 2013, 10 years ago, there were 2 claims that you could make, saying that first, we will solve it for Rajni, the street vendor that you see there, but we'll do it in a way that's a jugalbandi between public infrastructure and private innovation. Right? And that public infrastructure that you need was known 10 years ago. Then you spent 10 years, a bunch of misfit volunteers building that public infrastructure, 1 item a year, just relentlessly going on without government funding and gifting it away to the government. All the items that you see have come up like that. So it needs sustained effort over 10 years. Third, you couldn't do it on your own. We have not done it before. So if you had to build a platform like Aadhaar, we had never built a platform, but you know what? GPS had been built, so there was something to learn as to how do you create a platform that's free to use for people and has transformational, what can we learn from them? If you have to build a protocol, UPI, I'm sure everybody here uses UPI. UPI at its core is a protocol. And that protocol that if you have to build, you have to learn from people who had already built those protocols before. You know who are the people who built those protocols before? If you use the email, you use a protocol called SMTP. If you use internet, you use a protocol called HTTP. All of which also uses another protocol called TCP/IP. P. All these P's are protocols. Who built them? An organization called IETF. Who owns IETF? How many employees does it have? None. All volunteers. Believe it or not, right? So then we had to learn from that. If you learn something and you give it away, that is the best way to know your learning is actually meaningful. This item that you see in 4th is a table that we released in 2017. We must have hosted at least 40 foreign teams coming to Bangalore to spend a day or 2, in some cases longer, to just do workshops on this table. So what does it do? It gives you the knowledge of those 40 people, and your knowledge becomes much better. Teaching is the best way to learn. Then you have to pick fights. I am a big believer in Panga entrepreneurship or Panga ecosystem creating. Because that Panga, how many of you know Panga word? If you don't take panga, you're not going to do anything at all. Because how can you be in circle of 5 if you're not thinking of panga? It is a panga by definition, right? So if you have to take panga, this panga that landed in our laps was the one with Facebook. Facebook wanted to bring something here called free basics. I'm not going to go into the detail. You know, we were the 27th country that they came to, 26 countries had approved, and we took a panga with them, and then of course that became the creator of learning that allowed us to today do 3 open networks: open network for credit, open network for commerce, open network for health. And then finally, once you're at it, then you begin to then have sedimentation that takes place. You begin to realize that there is a deeper version of this. You know, how many of you do yoga here? Many hands are going up. When you mean yoga, you all mostly mean yogasana. 84 asanas that are there. How many of you practice Yoga Sutra? I don't see a single hand going up. Did I miss anybody? No. Yoga Sutra is more important than Yogasana. That is true yoga. That's how you live your life. But that Yoga Sutra is a sedimented form of yoga. That's the key part that is there. So now there is the sedimentation that has taken place. Things like techno-legal regulation, right? Things like somebody must own ecosystem building for 10-15 years. These are ideas that have sedimented, which are now in a position to then be applied somewhere else. Because many of those asanas won't travel to new ecosystems, but the sutras will travel to new ecosystems. And there, the big learning is that the government cannot be the sutradhar for the ecosystem. Why? Because the minister will change, the bureaucrat will change. It is not possible. It can be a university. In driverless cars, that's the Carnegie Mellon University. And slowly our universities are beginning to move in that direction. But sadly, there's some work to be done. It can be labs. CSIR labs could be like that. But look, a lot of the work that you talked about happens because of one of the co-founders of IKP, you know, Dr. Ramesh Mashelkar. He himself will tell you that even the labs, although he comes from NCL, he was the CSIR lab head. Sadly, our labs haven't stepped up to this. Will something change in the next 5 years? I hope it does. Very unlikely. So really the responsibility of this falls to organizations like IKP or iSPIRT and organizations like this. Because they are the ones who can be the sutradhar for this as you go forward. Right? Because they have to be the entity that will hold this mission. They will bring, I like to say this and I get beaten up for it, but I say this to provoke. To bring Bangalore, Delhi and Bombay together. Right? Because today all the public infrastructure building happens in Bangalore. All the policy making happens in Delhi. All the money bags are in Bombay. If you don't get them on board, you know, nothing will happen. So you have to bring all of them together, and you have to often do it without power because you're not the government, you're not Reliance, you don't have the money of Reliance, but how do you bring all of them together? Power of ideas. That's the role of a sutradhar. To express or to be able to influence even when you don't have control. And it takes effort, but it is doable. So that then brings us to this idea, can we build a AI ecosystem in India? And I am here to tell you that we will die trying as a country. Because look, today there is a circle of 2. There are only 2 countries in that AI ecosystem. It's China and it's US. And we don't want this to become digital colonization again. And so therefore this is one of the most important things alongside climate and others that we have to engage with. So if you have to do that, what do we do? Ultimately the ingredient for AI is data. So we have to unlock continental data sets. We have to be able to unlock data sets in a way that is safe, that is privacy preserving. I'll come to that in a minute. And so to do that, we need to build public tech. And there are 2 public techs that are coming, one from the government, which is, you will hear more about it. It's called IDP. It's a data platform, integrated data platform. And the second one that's come from iSPIRT, the 2 are complementary to each other. and they will unlock data, continental data sets. Because only those countries, those companies, modeling companies will win. Think of a health modeling company. They'll win only if they have large data sets to train their models on. And the only place you can get large data sets is actually continental size data sets. Can you get large data sets in Middle East from Dubai? No. Singapore? No. Japan? Even no for that. So you need to be able to unlock the India size data sets. Europe is very lost. They don't know what to do. So I don't think they'll be able to do that quickly enough, sadly. And China is already doing it. US is already doing it. That leaves the burden on India. And I think we will do it too. And if we do it too, our approach will be very different from the US and the China approach. But if we are successful in doing it, then we create the ingredient for modeling to happen. Second, we must be able to actually mobilize compute and of course talent and capital for this to happen. Because this is something which is also very important, of which compute is a geopolitical issue. The compute comes mostly from American Silicon Valley companies, NVIDIA in particular, right? And US has very cleverly, and if we were US, we would have done the same, put it under the export control regime. So now, if we are in the good books of the US, we'll have access to it. If you're not in the good books of US, we won't have access to it. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? It is what it is. We have to plan for it. So there's a geopolitical element to this. Reliance has 4,000 GPUs from NVIDIA. But when will they get it? It's a year or so from now. Tata's has 4,000 GPUs. There's a VC firm, AI Foundry, which has about 3,000 GPUs. So it's a good start. We are starting to arrange for GPUs in a way that was not possible earlier, by using both the government and the private sector acting in concert. And we'll have to do much more of this as we go forward. The third is, we got to be disciplined about where to focus on. Now, one of these areas where we must focus on is health. Because it's not in all areas that we can win. I will give you, for example, a counterintuitive thing. There's a lot of effort that happens because it's very easy to understand. Can we create ChatGPT in local languages? And I'll tell you that's not a good area to focus on. Because who has most local language video content? It's YouTube. Who has most written content on its, unfortunately, WhatsApp and Facebook. So whatever open data that we unlock goes to them. And whatever is already with them stays with them, doesn't become available to an Indian entrepreneur. So an Indian entrepreneur will never have sufficient data to build models to compete with them. Health is not like that. Health in the US has HIPAA. HIPAA is very restrictive and therefore has not allowed continental data sets to be unlocked in the US for AI. So if we can move quickly on health, we will actually have the largest continental data sets on health, and therefore there is a possibility that Indian companies emerge as AI leaders, not because that's what their primary goal may be. Their primary goal may be to use Indian data for Indian models, for Indian patients and Indian citizens, but in doing so, they will create a byproduct that will also be relevant to the world. Can you believe that? So we must do challenge grants. I mentioned TB challenge grant. Where did that TB challenge grant happen? Who was the program manager for that TB challenge grant? Can somebody tell me here? Of course, dip in with that. The IKP was the TB challenge grant. Most successful challenge grant in the country. And with help and learnings from IKP, there's another one taking place which is to do with drones. That is also looks on a path of success. Can we now scale this out as we go forward? So we draw the attention of our entrepreneurs, not by asking them, but by drawing their attention through challenge grants, so that they focus on the right set of problems, winnable problems that we have. And last but not the least, and you can see whether it happens or not. This is a test, I think, for country. Can we be the first country in the world to create a holistic AI regulator? Because AI regulation actually has many dimensions. I've only listed 3. One dimension is to make sure that privacy is preserved. that the DPDP bill and Mighty will do. Second dimensions is that the users are protected, right? In the car that I came, that car has been crash tested. So by the government insists on a car testing so that the citizens are riding in somewhat safe cars. The food that we eat is labeled. The government insists on that label so that I can choose the right food that I eat. We need both testing and labeling for AI models to protect the users. That regulation has to come. Third is, we want fireflies lighting up the sky, not a few dominant companies doing this in India. So therefore, competition and monopolization is also important. If now a startup has to deal with 3 different regulators in AI, what do you think will be the result? Mayhem. Right? How do we know that? Because one of the things that India has brought to life is called the account aggregator. How many of you know about the account aggregator? It's about sharing of financial data. I see some hands going up. That's a FSDC regulation. All the financial regulators came together. But the practical implementation is, God knows, harrowing, messy. Even though it's an attempt, for the first attempt by SEBI, RBI, IRDA and PFRDA to do it together. They're well-meaning. They want to do it together. But in our world, doing things together inside the government is not in our DNA, is it? It's only siloization is in our DNA. I hope I'm not offending some of you. But this is the reality. So if we have to do this well, we have to break this cycle. And I can tell you, I would bet today there is a 60% chance that India will break this cycle. Because this realization is emerging that we must do something different. Doing more of the same is not the answer. And if you see this announcement in the next 6 months or so, make a bet on India becoming an AI ecosystem for the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharad. That was inspiring. If at all, one thing that all startups and all of us can take is take panga. Challenge the status quo. I think it's very important that we should do that, and it's a very inspiring talk that we had. Thank you again for that.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to MyStartuptv.